Okay, we're ready to go. I think we have a quorum here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a conversation I am genuinely excited about because it's something all of us here are very passionate about at Seerist as well, but also personally. We really care deeply about the community in general and supporting people as they consider career pivots outside of the government or military. So we really want this webinar to be useful, not just interesting, not just inspiring, but genuinely practical. So our goal is to really offer advice, share resources, highlight tools that actually work. And whether you're actively considering making a transition out of the government or military, or you're just exploring maybe what private sector intel or security might look like, we really want you to walk away from this session with tangible things and real insight into what the journey looks like. And that was something that we felt very strongly about as we put this together. I made that jump myself about 7 years ago. I was an Air Force civilian analyst, and I left to go to Meta, just looking to challenge myself in a more fast-paced environment. And that decision really changed a lot of things for me in my career trajectory. So today, I am thrilled to be joined by two professionals who have also made that transition in very different ways. So first to my left is Jim Brooks, our CEO at Seerist. He brings over 30 years of experience across the CIA. He was a Navy SEAL and of course, the private sector. He's advised Fortune 500s and global organizations on intel security and resilience. And to my right, we have Kevin Uniacke, who joined Seerist recently as Director of Intel Programs. And he spent over a decade as an Air Force intelligence officer, and he continues to serve in the New York Air National Guard. So let's dive in. We'll break this up into a couple of different sections, but first we really want to spend some time sort of demystifying the private sector. When I talk to a lot of people thinking about making this move into the private sector, one thing I hear often is a sense of uncertainty, sort of the unknown. What does it look like? What does private sector intel or security or other fields policy, what does that really look like? What does it mean? Can you thrive in it? How different will it feel? I think there's just a lot of sort of unanswered questions as part of that. For me, even though I was mentally very ready to leave the government and try something different, I even still underestimated how transformational that shift would be and how much it would feel, even as a civilian. And the pace was much faster, the structure looser, the language, totally new language and acronyms to learn. But over time, I found tools, support systems, and a different kind of confidence in that space. We really want to try and demystify some of that for you today. So Jim, I wanted to turn this one to you. You've seen this transition evolve over the years. How has that looked for you? And long before private sector intelligence was developed as it is now, what do you think people misunderstand most about private sector intel? And what did this look like for you when you did it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I always like to say there is a whole world out there, and oftentimes when you're spent a career or the first 10 years of your life, wherever you are in government service, you understand government very well, probably your department, your agency, but you don't understand the private sector, and it's a bit confusing. So I think the easiest way to look at this is to think of the private sector, especially the multinational company side, the large corporates, as quasi-state entities in their own right. And for that, it means that every role that sits within the government today also sits in some guise. It may be called something different. We may use different vernacular from time to time, but the same jobs need to be done in the private sector. So as I link that down to sort of intelligence professionals or military professionals or those in the security world themselves, I try and break it down on the for-profit side in a couple ways. There are roles that are perfectly well suited for, let's go with the intelligence professional side of it, for the opportunity side of these businesses. So how do they make profit and gain profit within their business? That can be in new market entry, in building those relationships, strategic business development, everything that you use your soft skills that you've learned in the government, that wisdom that you've learned through hard problem solving to generate those opportunities and new cultures, new environments, new channels for businesses, and to support that side. On the other side of that equation is probably what most people think about, and I think that's the revenue protection side of it. So how do I protect an organization's people, their profits, their operations, and do those things that keep my organization safe while they're out there operating in our country or anywhere across the globe themselves. And it's sort of understanding that whether you're working in protective intelligence, or you're working in cyber, or you're working in security risk management, or you're working in strategic business development, the fundamental skills that we have from a lot of our government roles are equally applicable in the private sector. We just have to nuance and understand the language. So it's more of that translation side of it. And I'd say, what are the actions that I think can really help as you're going through this transition? Take a real keen curiosity in what drives business. And I'm focusing on business. You could go into nonprofit, NGOs are all over space, but the biggest side of this equation is business. So take a real keen interest in it. Watch CNBC occasionally. Understand what's driving business, what they care about, what opportunities they're trying to seek, and so on and so forth. So you can understand where you want to position yourself, what industry, what type of environment, whether you want to be on that more entrepreneurial sort of enablement side, or you feel more comfortable on that protection side of the equation.
You have given me that advice too. And I will say it helped even just to start understanding words and phrases and things you're hearing from other parts of business in a more effective way to sort of frame how you're, working your space in your role. So I think it's great advice. Kevin, as someone who has recently made the jump, maybe you can talk a little bit about navigating the space. Maybe an interesting question: what has been the most surprising sort of thing for you about working in this new environment?
Sure. And yeah, as Melissa mentioned, I made, I guess my pivot kind of started about a year ago. I did use a bridge going to do some master's programs, and purposely was like exposing myself to other sectors. I knew and felt very comfortable in the government space. So I was like, oh, if I'm going to position myself as this person who can do cross-sector collaboration, maybe I should develop a degree of familiarity and familiarity from a language perspective in the public sector or nonprofit sector. So I did that, and then realized, oh, I don't know much about the private sector, so sought to get a little bit dangerous in there. And as I continued to make that pivot, I first landed in what I knew. And like Jim mentioned, there's a whole world out there, and I think that was the initial challenge for me, is I wasn't really aware of the scope and scale of opportunity and how to find it. And so my initial pivot after I finished those programs and trying to understand like what's important to me. I'm an intelligence officer by trade. I love that analytical approach. I love the mindset. I always say, I pinch myself, I feel like intelligence, you get to, sit down, have a cup of coffee, read some really cool things, digest it, have a conversation about it, figure out how to communicate it in a way that's impactful to someone else. It's like, how can I do that? Well, the first place, not being too original, was defense contracting. For me, it felt knowable. It felt, familiar. Even the paperwork trail, and by that I mean my resume, didn't have to really change too much. It was a language that was understood, and so I landed there. And so that with it, still private sector felt like dipping my toes into a wider unknown pool of opportunity. What I would say is, and I can explain it a bit later, it didn't end up being what I felt like internally as the right fit for me, even though the company was great, the portfolio was great, there were a few things missing. But to give me an opportunity to continue those conversations, to learn that wider unknown, to explore like what is intelligence. And I can say, even as I've gotten into Seerist, I've been here for 3 months and continue to learn the business and the language in a much more nuanced and detailed way. is that, that learning curve continues. And I realized that there's intelligence jobs in areas I had no understanding of. Something that's new to me, and I know that there's a higher degree of familiarity, maybe in for sure for you, Melissa, and Jim, as for you as well, protective intelligence, and what is the Security Operations Center or a Global Security Operations Center, which is like a foundational, way that corporations execute like intelligence, activities and mission sets, and maybe a different way than what the federal space feels like. Understanding what they do and recognizing like, oh, I wouldn't have even known how to apply to those or to converse with until I started to recognize, how do I explore that? It's typically by having a conversation and leveraging that expertise that someone like you two may know, or someone within my community that I built, which is in those master's programs, or people from my previous experiences in the Air Force. It's like how to tap into that. So I would say the things that have been give me confidence is that there is increasing opportunities, particularly in the wake of some current events in intelligence areas and protective intelligence and what that looks like. And it's all about conversing, like really what's important to you. How do you want to create your own brand and position yourself that you can then translate and communicate to someone who can identify, oh, actually, you might be pretty well suited to go do that. And let me at least put you in touch with this person. And I know it can feel transactional, but really it's not. It's just, how can you advocate for yourself and identify your interests and do so in a way that makes sense in the new language that you hope to speak, which in this case was private sector speak. So I think that, to go back to, some of your original question, Melissa, too, what has been surprising about here, I would say in the private sector is the speed. That things move. It is dynamic, and I wanted dynamic, and it was dynamic as advertised, but in a good way. I didn't want to be just doing the same thing every day, but that meant I needed to listen, but listen with intent, be a sponge and soak up things, but also be an active participant in educating myself in the areas that I didn't feel strong in. And I think that I have to do that in a way that equip me to operate and be the expert. Like, I'm an intelligence professional by trade. How can I do that? But how can I do that in a way that resonates with this new area that I'm operating in? Not just being the federal guy. I need to expose myself to the commercial sector, or we have a diverse portfolio. Like, how can I speak the language that they're doing? And that doesn't always mean just speaking federal. And so it's been kind of fun, really operating in that fashion, and then also recognizing and valuing the differences, but a lot of the foundations that are the same, which is, if I don't feel confident, and I've felt that way over many, many years, like, how do I maintain my confidence? Like, what I bring is value is, going back to the foundational pieces, which is, I know intelligence tradecraft, I understand, how to do structured analytical thinking, and that is the common thread across sectors that I can leverage. I just need to sometimes figure out how you're saying it. So, yeah.
I think a common thread through, I think what we've all said so far is this idea of self-introspection in this process of making this move. With any career move, self-awareness is critical. You really have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? What do I want out of this next chapter? And when you come from government or military roles, there is absolutely a strong sense of purpose and mission. And I think in some ways you can kind of take that for granted in those roles. It's so inherent that I don't even know that you think about it as much. But that was something that it was a struggle for me, really, starting when I left the government, was finding what is that mission, what is that purpose that we're all working towards here. And it feels a little bit different outside of the government or the military. Jim, what value do you put on this part of the process, that self-introspection about what you want, how you're going to achieve it, what is your purpose? I know this is something that you speak about a lot, working for a very long time now with the Honor Foundation and helping military members transition. There's a lot of options, some conventional choices, as Kevin described, maybe some not. What is the value in that part of this process?
It's tremendous. So first, I've been fortunate enough to support hundreds of people transitioning military and civil service across federal agencies. And I would say the first thing that I see in almost every occasion is, you use the words, but that lack of clarity of mission and purpose. And the great thing about government service is whether you're in a military service or you're in a government agency, they have very concrete missions. You know exactly the role of each agency, or each entity. It's probably why you joined it. You were passionate about it. And the biggest hurdle is when you come into the private sector, you don't have that same crystal clear clarity that stays continuous over time in a lot of companies. It evolves because the nature of the world evolves. So I think first, just being very pragmatic that you can step in and expect a little bit of a dynamic environment and a dislocation from what you're used to on that purpose and clarity side to what the new world. And it's not a bad thing, it's just different. And I think being able to rename it as a different thing, and that's a different experience, is a very helpful thing. And over time, you sort of understand what your purpose is in this new world. But most importantly, and whether you voluntarily made this decision to transition or by other means you're transitioning at this point, I think being able to step back and see, well, what is the opportunity in this? What did I love about what I've done heretofore in my life? And what are those elements that I have an opportunity to pivot in, either lean into and do more of, or change? And so where I always start is starting with your why. That's a very intrinsic thing. What really drives you as a person, and how do you want to have that impact on the world itself? It's not what you do. This is a very intrinsic question. So start from there, and then you can pivot out. Well, what type of culture do you want to work in? What really drives your energy to the highest point? Type of people? Do you want highly collaborative? Do you want fiercely competitive? Do you want a lot of authority, or do you want sort of a autonomy and engagement in an entrepreneurial environment? What is it that makes you your best from productivity, from an intellectual performance, from a learning and curiosity, and really drives that forward? What are those things in your work-life balance that you've changed? If you've been deploying 10 months a year for the last 7 years, is there something you want to change on that? Or if you work in a skiff for 12 hours a day, is there something you want to change in that? What is the opportunity that you're going to lean into? So I think take a really curious approach to examining how your life has been. Draw a column on what has been brilliant, what's really made me my best, and put those on one side. What are those things that are net detractors that maybe you can control for? So as you start to look into the world, now you can start experiencing different opportunities through your networking, through your interview process, through your engagement with the community, that will help you refine, well, what's going to be a great fit for me, and turn this into an exciting opportunity that I can be enthused about on a daily basis versus a job. Because no one should just be seeking a job. Jobs are easy to find, but finding that place that really ignites you and who you are, getting that passion so you can continue on that same high that you've been in your service organization in the private sector is to me what's most important.
And this could quite literally be a writing exercise, using your network to have those conversations and understand more about what that might be for you.
It's really hard for a lot of us to be introspective because we spend so much time looking and examining the environment and the context of the world around us that we don't spend a lot of time examining ourselves, or at least I never did. So how do we actually, whatever practice is going to make sense, and iterate? And it's oftentimes really helpful to do it with people who are really close to you. So you can go, so Melissa, you can go, Jim, that's not true. You know that's not true. You hated this. And call me out when I'm going down a line that's convenient because it's kind of muscle memory versus authentic and really what drives me or not. So finding your community, your people to anchor to is really important. That's family, that's friends, that's professional peers and colleagues, it's everyone within that genre.
I think on that, the idea of your sort of your own values, your own preferences, guiding your decisions, you know, going forward to move. Would love to know how you navigated that, Kevin. How did your own values and preferences, you kind of hinted at some of this already before, like how did you use that to make sense of things in the moment?
Yeah, I think, you know, Jim hit a lot of the key pieces, right? And it is that ability to critically look within, but then also to hold yourself accountable for doing your research externally. And by that, I mean exploring who's operating the spaces I'm interested in, who are their founders, like what is the mission, what are the values that they uphold. And you know, sometimes you can have a degree of skepticism because, like, of course, every company or wherever you're operating is going to position themselves in a certain way. But I think if you can have those honest conversations internally, and I really do like the piece too, where like to vocalize it externally makes you then think about, well, how am I actually communicating this? Because I'm going to have to do this at some point anyways, so that I can convey why I'm a good fit potentially for a company, and also they're a good fit for me. And that's one piece I would just like to say in times of uncertainty when things are pretty dynamic and you're looking for a new opportunity, whether intended or unintended, is the fact to remember that like you bring a lot of value to the table, and companies, you know, should also value that in you as well. So like, don't just, I can understand there can be an urgency and it depends on everyone's unique situation, but don't forget your value in the searching process. And be willing to identify where your thresholds are and how you feel about, do I need to make a decision because it might be financially motivated, and so I'm willing to accept something a little bit off center of what I'm looking for, or do I have some time and space to be a bit more patient and maybe find something that fits a bit more. And the reason I say that is when I made that, what made me kind of think of my values in my pivot and like what I really wanted to extract from my private sector job when I was doing the defense contracting. And again, I say this, the company was great and the portfolio was great. What I realized for myself is what I was missing was a team. Like I was one of one on this portfolio. I was working in a government center, and the other half of the contract was largely based on consultants. Now, consultants are great. Everyone's different, but they might have a different, way of collaborating and a different mission. And especially when they're consultants from a different company and you're a contractor, there can be we're all still working in the same space, but we might not all be working together in the same direction. We might have different motivations in what's driving us to do that. And so while I tried to show up and be a team player, I would say that was or was not always receptive or, well received on the other end. And while I enjoyed the areas I was learning about and really trying to rapidly grow, and I was like, okay, I'm hitting the intel box. I'm learning a lot, from this perspective. What I'm missing is like, I'm not getting the collaboration that I really derive probably the most value from. I love being a part of a team. I think it's what drove me into the military. As corny as it sounds, I know it really is true. And then the other piece is, because that team, I was just walking around and kind of questioning, is this it? And I always told Melissa the story. In the place where I worked, there was a Subway. And oftentimes I did not have time to go eat lunch. And so I'd go down to the Subway and there was, I'd get my $17 Subway sandwich and be clomping through the echoey chamber that was the place I was working with my tie on. And be like, all right, well, I'm wearing a suit. That's cool. I feel, grown up in a different sense. It's not a uniform, but I'm toting my Subway sandwich. And I found myself asking more and more, what am I doing? Was this the intent of what I was trying to achieve? And that made me kind of go back to the drawing board, have a discussion with my wife about, would you be okay if I potentially seek some additional, employment opportunities when I return from a deployment? I happened to get deployed in between, so it was a good decision point. And when I came back from the deployment, we kind of laid out a roadmap of like, here's what I'm looking to do. Here is where I think I will find value. For me, that is, I want a team. I want it to be dynamic. I want to have an impact and a say. And I want to see a place that I could grow in a culture with which I could do that and learn in areas that aren't just super familiar to me. I want to have that space to kind of, get creative with it. And so when it came down to that, I just realized that what was more important to me was less about salary less about title and it was more about impact and collaboration and how can I find the happy medium that is that, and what am I willing to kind of accept and understand near-term gains, longer-term gains, and how does that align with what I'm trying to do?
It's such a great comment at the end there, because that prioritization helps a lot of people. You know, if you have to choose where you work, who you work with, how much you get paid, how much you enjoy what you do, if you can rank order those, you can also start focusing, okay, well, I want to travel, or I want to be home all the time, or I want this balance, or money's not important, but that intellectual challenge is super important, or I really want to work with this type of people, this type of human. And so you can start anchoring around those things, and it helps sort of clarify the types of organizations and sometimes the types of roles or types of industries you want to be in.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, and I think being able to define those, and especially one of the things that was new to me in transitioning into the private sector was I understand my value because I've done the work to think about it, but I've never been actually asked to attach a numerical value to myself as well in the negotiation sense, or you know, when you have that first conversation with HR,
You're a
and
10.
you're trying to figure
You're
it
a
out.
10.
Oh, thank you. And you're trying to figure that out. I think those things go a long way in preparing you to enter into a new area. It's just there's going to be different considerations that you have to make, and consider why you're chasing something and what you're chasing. Is it fulfilling an ego need? Is it fulfilling a financial need? And I would say that, you know, salary, titles, you know, amount of responsibilities and recruits, they can all vary, and finding something that works for you is important. So.
I do love that example, because I think it's self-introspection, like in action.
Yeah.
It's having done it live. And we'll talk a little bit more in a second too, but it's also about sort of, it's not a mistake, right? But like kind of making a choice, realizing it wasn't the right one, like time to make a, you know, that's another decision point. That's another time to sort of, okay, what's my next step? How do I action that? And how do I, you know, how do I adjust and make a change that's right for me now that I've done the work and I see what I want? I do want to call out too, just again, we have the chat, drop questions or comments or anything in there, please. We're watching it, so we can address anything too. If there's anything live, we can see that. So, so please use it. We've all talked too a lot, I mean, you're making these transitions very easy, about positioning yourself. And you had mentioned that too, sort of how, you know, once you know what you want and you've done that self-introspection, you know, that next challenge is how do you position yourself for it? And as we've all said here, if you come from the government or the military, any spaces like that, from those backgrounds, you have so much value to bring to so many different organizations, corporations, companies. You've had formal training, you have a mission-driven focus, technical expertise. It's really hard to find in other places. And so there's so much value that you can bring. The key is really just learning how to translate that experience. And I remember I actually hired a resume writer when I knew I wanted to get out of the government. And they were pretty good, but I remember in the first conversation, he had read my resume, which was geared for USA jobs. And he said, we're really going to need to demilitarize your resume. And I will never forget that, because now looking at resumes, you can see, you know, where those skills have been translated, and how you work through those things, doing that, you know, in a very live way. And then there's, you know, we talk too, like networking and using your network. It kind of is a dirty word as part of this, but it is part of your positioning and how you're translating your skills and learning about how you want to, you know, position yourself and what you want for your future. But it's not just something for somebody that's super extroverted. I am very much an introvert, and networking always felt like a giant obstacle for me. But actually, now that I've learned what it really means, you know, which is just relationship building and growing those connections with people, when you think about it in that way, it's actually not insurmountable. It's something we all do on a regular basis. And I think you have a really good take on this, Jim. We've said it before, all jobs aren't posted online. And I think that's a good way of segueing into that kind of networking piece. And how do you, how important is your network really? How do you leverage that? What does it look like in practice?
So first, I love that we're not having a conversation about actual hard skills, saying things that we learn. And I'd say from a transition perspective, that's great news. And the reason we're not doing that is because those skills are directly transferable. It's the translation sometimes, and maybe it's called something, but what you do is not different. So we lean on the soft skills. One of those things in the toolbox is our network. And I think as you're transitioning, whether you're extroverted or introverted, a lot of us have lived in a world where we didn't have a voice that was really outside. We didn't have a personal brand that was sort of outside. We didn't spend a lot of time cultivating an external network. We had internal relationships and internal networks that were necessary for doing our mission or our jobs on a daily basis. So as you get out to the bigger world, I say there's a couple things that are necessary. Find your voice. What's your story? And don't anchor backwards. Think about, how do you leverage those experience and what you've learned and what your story really is. And it's not what you did. It's who you are, it's your purpose, it's your passion, it's your why. It's those things that come out in your story. The next thing I would say is figure out how you want to play that in your brand, or if you're using LinkedIn or any of those tools to start, putting yourself out there. Then I think you find from the network side is first, people want to help people. And I think that's a fundamental understanding is when people ask you a favor, it's not a burden. They can say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have time. They can say, I don't think I can help you. I'm not the right person, but here is someone else who may be able to help you, or they can help you themselves. But I haven't met people who we want to associate with and hang out with who don't want to help other people. It's just kind of a natural in their tendency. So I think find your collaborators, start close, that's your existing professional friends, that's your friends who are outside your professional work network, and that's your family. And start practicing your story, iterating, and that's talking about your interest and what you want to do, reframing what you've done historically to what you want to do tomorrow. And it can be directional. It does not have to be precise, but each iteration and practice of this conversation helps you refine, not just delivering a message, but actually helps you refine and seek deeper truth in what you actually want to do. Because what is having the conversation do? Well, it elicits a conversation is two ways. So you're learning in each of those interactions. And as you develop your network, your external network, you can find it flourishes very naturally and very quickly. Some people are supernatural about this and they're energized by doing it. I think the bulk of us are not. We find it exhausting. We probably find it slightly intimidating at times until we realize actually we're just talking with people. And it's no different than anything I've done at any point in my life, whether I was arriving in at a new command or a new agency or a new department. I was having conversations with new people. I found, you form those relationships and networks naturally. The biggest tool in the private sector is your network. That's both for you personally, for your sharing knowledge, for increasing your knowledge, for learning, for understanding what's happening in the world or amongst competitors. It's valuable for whatever business you get into, because whatever role you're into, that network begins to multiply and expand. And it is more than likely the way you're going to find your opportunity, whether or not there is a public posting for it. There's millions of public postings, and the chances that you're going to find that one that fits your need and who you are and is a right fit is pretty low. But the chances are that if you're networking with like-minded people who are within the spaces that you're interested in, that Kevin's going to say to Melissa, frankly, I think exactly what happened between you and Kevin, Melissa. Oh, I know somebody who has a role that might be perfect for you. Let me make an introduction. And a no isn't a personal thing. A no is just, I don't have anything for you. So you've got to sort of be very Teflon coated and recognize, well, not everyone's going to respond to you. Who cares? Not everyone's going to say yes. that doesn't really matter. But if the 3 people out of 20 people who say yes and you get in a conversation, introduce you to 3 more people, and you've now had 9 fruitful conversations, you start getting the traction. But it's all learning, because what you're getting out of this is you're constantly refining and ending yourself in a more precise location of where you want to be. And then you'll pay it back in your network over time. So it's a very fluid interaction, but the network is important, and you can start from 0 and build a flourishing network in a matter of months if you're just very proactive, and that can be local industry groups. There's also, no matter what city you are, there's great associations, industry associations, professional associations, school alumni groups, social groups, intramural sports clubs. They're all networking opportunities. Find your way to engage, and get out of your home or wherever you are. It's really important.
I think, the thing that I had to learn out of all of that was it doesn't necessarily have to mean it's transactional.
Right.
It's not, and that's, that wouldn't be genuine to me. There are people that have these very vast, large networks of people that works for them. That's their style. That's who they are. That's not me. I had to sort of find my own networking style, which was much more sort of relationship building and diving in and learning a lot more about a specific person, or really, it doesn't have to be that transactional thing that I think it often can feel like, or is described as. I'll pick on you again, Kevin, because your resume, I think it really stood out as both genuine and authentic to you as a person, but also well tailored to those skills, those transferable skills that we all already have, and you translated it very well. So can you walk us through your approach to positioning your skills and your experience?
Sure. Well, I'm not sure the quality of this camera can show, but I'm blushing. Thank you. No, I think really when it comes down to it, it was an iterative process over a few years, fits and starts as to like, how can I showcase the hard skills that we have to maybe even get a foot in the door, but really to your competitive advantage then is how can you translate those soft skills and let yourself, a bit of you shine through. Because what I found when I've been looking through different things, it's like, who kind of differentiates themselves is not like silly or humor, but just like kind of a different connection, or a different way of displaying information in a way that doesn't detract from what you're trying to bring to the table, but maybe, emphasizes it. And I got some great advice from different friends, and just kind of from my own frustrations when I was seeking additional opportunities and feeling like, is this an ATS thing? And I'm not even making it through the HR, wickets. And if only I could have a conversation, like I'm sure I can do well if I have a conversation. To being like, maybe I'm just not seeking the right roles, or maybe I'm just not qualified. I was like, uh-oh, what's going on with confidence? Well, one of my, friends put me onto this one resource, which I talked about. And I know there's like a tools aspect of thing, and it's not all tools based, but it was this resume builder thing, modular approach, where I could see different ways to graphically build my resume. And what I found resonated in an extent was there was this day of my interest wheel. And I got to kind of put in what was important to me. And it was like friends and family, traveling. I put in something about overlanding, which is like more off-roading, RVing. A few things where people are just like, cool, that all looks good. See where you went to school, see what you've done, but what is overlanding? And then I also had an interesting fact at the end. They're like, you placed 26th of 28 in a camel derby? Why were you in a camel derby in Kenya? And so it's just like, an easy icebreaker, but I don't think it did it to the point where it detracted from the other pieces, and it laid out in a sense. And when I say it's iterative, like those things can differentiate. But at its core, I had to iterate through, what am I communicating? Is the language I'm using making sense? Am I tying this in, if it's private sector, to business outcomes? And how can I showcase that in a way that is impactful? And how am I translating the skills that I've done in the military in a way that resonate with how I think I could amplify what you're trying to achieve in your business context? And a lot of that was showcasing high emotional intelligence and leadership aptitude, willingness to learn, willingness to collaborate, but doing that in a way that I turned my officer performance bullets that are very structured in their own language that you need the Rosetta Stone for, into a way that someone who's a layman could just understand and then be like, okay, let's have that conversation.
I'm definitely dropping something about a camel derby in the Slack today.
There we go. And yeah, I was second to last, so that's why I'm here.
I know we're running up on time here. We only have 5 minutes left. That we could go for a lot longer, but we did really want to talk head on about challenges. I think we've talked a little bit already about that. There are absolutely hard parts of doing this transition, really any career transition. But this in particular, it does feel like there could be challenges for, as you navigate these. No matter how prepared you are, it's still a leap. It feels normal to be a little uncomfortable in that kind of situation. I thought I was ready for that move. I mentally was. I wanted that challenge. I was ready to work in big tech, but even then, the culture shock and the feeling of having the language different, that was all very real, and that became a challenge over the first couple of months that I was there. Kevin, from your experience, how did you adjust to these new norms? What did it feel like, sort of adapting to a new culture?
So I would say good in the sense because I found the right culture, right? And so I knew that it was a safe place where I could communicate and, as Ted Lasso would say, be curious, not judgmental. I was trying to be curious, but in an intentional way, to ask the questions, understanding like it's not going to undercut me in the long run if I'm just trying to figure out what might be value add for the position and role I'm filling. And so I had to understand what matters in a new context, like what are the requirements driving, what we do here in a Seerist context. I think what was new to me in the mission sense and having operated in the federal space was the different decision advantage that the private sector wants and expects when their bottom line or resource protection or something else might be way different and much less risk averse than the lumbering public sector that has a higher risk appetite. And so a lot of that was through conversations. I found that I navigated it, by having people I could, trust and talk to, and you might not always have that great opportunity of having known or worked with someone before, like I got to with Melissa. And so it was scheduling in a targeted way, in a way that I hope, I guess, to let me know, didn't waste anyone's time, but like one-on-one conversations, A, to introduce myself, B, to start to understand what is it you do? Here's what I understand my role as, and how can we collaborate, and what are opportunities for us to, work together. That helps me to understand, A, this language better, B, how you are approaching a problem set or a challenge, so I can start to be like, okay, I need to do a little bit more homework there. I don't know what that is. And it can help me kind of structure my day and my own resources a bit better. We already talked a lot about the language and the speed. I think that the only other piece that took and is still taking a bit of an adjustment for me, and that's okay, that's why I'm here, is use to different technologies. I know who I am, and I know what I bring to the table, and I know my growth areas, and I'm going to lean into those. I am not an AI guy, by trade. I've done the application and use case part. And so I'm leaning into what are the tools and technologies and ways to do that in a rapid and innovative way, while not trying to be a self-professed AI person. No, I'm the Intel guy and can help you with tradecraft and structure and process and unlocking potential of people and organizations there. And so that's kind of how I've learned to kind of navigate those new differences, which I think it's been fun, and I think you have to approach each day like an adventure, and really just be open to opportunity.
This is the perfect wrap-up question, I think, to get reflective. What if someone does all the work and it still lands in the wrong place? What happens then? Sort of, what if I don't get it right?
Yeah. I think there is no right. And what I mean by that is when you're in government, you're in service, but I think the private sector, it's your profession in what you're doing. And there will be times when it's not, there'll be a material percentage of times where it's just not right, and change is fine. They're all learning opportunities. When I first left government, I didn't get it right. I went into something that I was passionate about as a person, which was commercial real estate. but it lacked so many things for me. It lacked the international interest, the global politics, that sort of feeling of having a real impact on something that to me was fundamentally important. And the culture side wasn't right. It wasn't as collaborative, as team centric. So I didn't get that purpose. And it took me sort of 8 months to figure that out. And I very quickly pivoted out of that. And I think we all have this, we can label things as, oh, that's a failure, but it's not a failure. It's a learning. I learned something about myself. So the next time I did it better. And I think when we look at the size of this transition, finding your purpose, finding your people, finding what you want to do in what industry and what location, that's a tall order to get everything right. So I think stand back, lean into opportunities, be curious, take appropriate risk for what you can at wherever you are in life. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And if you happen to miss the needle, well, then you've learned something by that experience and you'll get it better. You'll do it better the next time for yourself. You're not doing it better for anyone else. You're doing it better for yourself. I think that's what it's there.
Perfect. We're only 1 minute over, so I think we did pretty good. We could keep having this conversation. I think we should keep having this conversation. Please reach out. Maybe we'll do more of these if there's enough, enough people interested. Even if there's just one person interested, I think that's value add for us, because as I said at the start, we're really passionate about this and could talk for a long time about it. Again, please reach out where there's a lot of people in your network, and we are happy to be some of those people. So thank you very much for joining us all, and come back next time.
Thanks.
Thanks.